Welcome, everyone. We're so glad you're here. We know there were lots of other options and places to go today, and we're all worried about Delta virus, and so it's just wonderful to see such a nice crowd group. My name is Judy Wellman, and I'm the president of the 1816 Farmington Quaker Meeting House Museum. And we're delighted to be here and working with Wood Library, which we've done over many years as co-sponsors of this beautiful program. The 1816 Farmington Meeting House is in Farmington, you all want to drive by. And it was nationally important before the Civil War because of the movements for equal rights, especially for women. A lot of people from there went to the Seneca Falls Women's Rights Convention. For Seneca Indians, they were working with Senecas on a nationwide effort to keep the U.S. government from sending Senecas west of the Mississippi, and it's the reason Haudenosaunee people are the largest group of Native people who still have their homelands east of the Mississippi. And African Americans, and it was a major site of abolitionism in the Underground Railroad, and our favorite, of course, Frederick Douglass spoke there more than once, and our other favorite, David Anderson, who's I saw here a minute ago, was one of the earliest people to come to the meeting house when we started to think about restoring it, and he was maybe the first year we had programs. He spoke about Austin Stewart, who escaped from slavery in New York State, went immediately to Farmington, ended up in Canandaigua, and is buried in the cemetery. So it's just a fascinating, wonderful place. We sponsor programs every year relating to this theme of equal rights, past and present. So we have a combination of 19th century issues, and we ask all of us to think about what this idea means to us today. It's obviously not, history's not dead, it's still alive. That's why we're up here. That's why this program is so important. Most of you probably have heard of Fannie Lou Hamer, who organized the 1964 Freedom Summer Voter Registration Drive in Mississippi. And today you are in for a really special treat. It's with great pleasure that I introduce Akwaaba and all the people here who are from Akwaaba who are going to be part of this multimedia presentation. I had never seen you in operation until September 2019 when you gave a program in Niagara Falls at the National Park Service's Underground Railroad Network to Freedom Conference. I was blown away. It knocked my socks off. I put these socks on this morning. I mean, it was so, it gives me chills just to think about the quality of work that you do. And everyone in Akwaaba has day jobs, but amazingly, when they come to places like this, they are transformed spectacularly into historic figures. So it's with wonderful anticipation and pleasure that I give you Akwaaba and Fannie Lou Hamer.
Stay afterward for an informal questions and answers, whatever you like. And sign in, if you would, and have a cold one. I'm sorry for these housekeeping details.
And there is water, if anyone would like ice water to
Fannie
help
Lou
yourself.
Hamer was a black woman who lived, struggled, and died in the state of Mississippi. During the civil rights movement of the 1960s, she became a symbol of the strength and power of resistance, as thousands of blacks filled the streets, fighting against racism that had crippled their lives for centuries. We call her name today in the tradition of African libation. By pouring libation, we honor those who provide the ground we stand on. We acknowledge that we are here today because of something someone did before we came. Fannie Lou Hamer, Fannie Lou Hamer, Fannie Lou Hamer. people stand there. Fannie Lou Hamer, Fannie Lou Hamer, Fannie Lou Hamer, Fannie Lou Hamer. For 20 years she weighed the cotton down on a white man's farm. She received threats on her life, was fired from a job, scorned and kicked off the farm. Fannie Lou Hamer, Fannie Lou Hamer, Fannie Lou Hamer, Fannie Lou Hamer. We're sick and tired of being sick and tired. That's what the lady would yell. Her body was beaten and she walked crippled, trying to vote. She was thrown in jail. Fannie Lou Hamer, Fannie Lou Hamer, Fannie Lou Hamer, Fannie Lou Hamer. Land of the tree and home of the slave, she criticized the law of the land. For 100 years, blacks had lived in fear. Now they marched, took their lives in their hands. Fannie Lou Hamer, Fannie Lou Hamer, Fannie Lou Hamer, Fannie Lou Hamer. She came right here and she didn't stay long. Helped to turn a few things around. Cancer took her body, but the struggle got her soul. Now we laid her body in the ground. Fannie Lou Hamer, Fannie Lou Hamer, Fannie Lou Hamer, Fannie Lou Hamer.
Mr. Chairman, and to the Credentials Committee, my name is Mrs. Fannie Lou Hamer, and I live at 626 East Lafayette Street, Louisville, Mississippi. Sunflower County, the home of Senator James O. Eastland and Senator Stinnett.
Fannie Lou Hamer, Fannie Lou Hamer,
Fannie Lou Hamer,
Fannie Lou Hamer. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This 1964, Fannie Lou Hamer and the other delegates of the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party challenged the racist regular Democratic Party of that state before the National Democratic Convention in Atlantic City, New Jersey. Her testimony before the Credentials Committee was heard across the nation on television. Getting to that point was an amazing journey that required strength and courage.
She had grieving eyes, the kind of eyes that had seen a lot. She was no more than 5'3", but she was a strongly built woman. She had everything about her. Her spirit and her body said stamina. She had these big hands with enlarged knuckles that come from hard work. But everything about this woman, working or fighting, she would be in it to the end.
Now, Fannie Lou had the ability, and she developed the capacity to let African Americans, poor African Americans in Mississippi, know that they had capabilities far beyond the place that racist Mississippians had been holding them in since slavery time. She rose up from poverty and the place that Jim Crow had been holding her down in. She was a witness for African Americans who wanted to be recognized as citizens in the state and country that they had been born in, had labored in, had buried their dead in. She finished her speech with this challenge.
I was in jail when Medgar Evers was murdered, all on account of we wanting to register to vote, to become first-class citizens. If the Freedom Democratic Party is not seated now, I question America. Is this America, the land of the free, the home of the brave, where we have to sleep with our telephones off in the hook because our lives are being threatened daily, because we want to live as decent human beings in America?
Woke up this morning with my mind stayed on freedom. Woke up this morning with my mind stayed on freedom. Woke up this morning with my mind stayed on freedom. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Fannie Lou was the baby of 20 children born to Jim and Luella Townsend, sharecroppers in Mississippi. She walked with a limp because her legs had withered from the polio she got as a child. But that didn't stop her from working long and hard. Fact is, Fannie Lou had to start work too early.
Being part of a sharecropper family was a guarantee that you were going to work early in life. See, the landowner wanted the cheapest labor they could get. And since they didn't actually own people like they did during chattel slavery, they fixed up this system called sharecropping.
Poor African American families had little opportunity for jobs or education. So they signed on with a landowner with the understanding that the landowner would provide them with a house, really a shack, plow, seed, fertilizer, and not much else. Now the sharecroppers had to clear the land, fertilize and plant the seed, cultivate and harvest the crop. Now when the crop, usually cotton, was harvested and sold, the landowner was supposed to share the profits. But he controlled the books. And almost always would say something like,
Well, Jim, you did pretty good. Your share almost enough to pay these debts left last year. You and your young'uns worked harder this year, and you might catch up.
That would be the story almost every year. Sharecroppers had to buy what the family needed from the landowner. Many landowners charged high prices and interest because the purchases were made on credit. Again, the landowner kept the books. So African Americans were working cotton 12 to 14 hours a day just to stay alive. Fannie Lou grew up in the middle of this hardship. At 6 years of age, she was able to care for her little house, while her sisters and brothers worked alongside their parents in the fields.
But one day, this landowner drove up to me and he said, "Girl, I bet you could pick cotton." And I said, "I don't know." He said, "Well, sure you can. I bet you could pick 30 pounds of cotton." He said, "And if you do, I'll give you anything you want from the commissary store." Well, he started naming things like Cracker Jacks and sardines and Daddy Wide Legs, that's those gingerbread cookies. All these things I knew I would love, but I never had a chance to have. Well, he gave them to me all right, and I picked the 30 pounds of cotton. Well, the next time, I had to pick 60 pounds of cotton. And then by the time I was 13, I could pick 300 pounds of cotton.
Jump down, turn around, pick a bale of cotton. Jump down, turn around, pick a bale a day. Jump down, turn around, pick a bale of cotton. Jump down, turn around, pick a bale a day.
African American children could go to public school in Mississippi December, January, February, and March. The other 8 months of the year, they were expected to be in the fields. Fannie Lou was happy to go to school and to share what she learned with her parents. She even taught her mother how to write her own name. For the short time she went to school, Fannie Lou loved it. She loved the reading and the writing and the counting too.
God knows I did. And at first, we children, we laughed a little bit at our teacher. His name was Professor Thornton.
I got shoes, you got shoes, all of God's children got shoes. When I get to heaven, gonna put on my shoes, I'm gonna walk all over God's heaven. Heaven, everybody's talking about heaven, ain't going to heaven. Heaven, I'm gonna walk all over God's heaven.
See, what we would laugh at was how he wore his shoes. See, he'd wear his shoes the right way for a few days, and then he'd take the left shoe and put it on the right foot, and take the right shoe and put it on the left foot. And he'd walk around like that. Well, I tell you, one day, he caught this boy laughing. Tell you the truth, I was glad he caught that boy. But you know what? Professor Thornton didn't scold that boy or yell at us or nothing. He just explained why he wore his shoes that way. Well, he wore his shoes that way to straighten out the heel.
Makes sense.
Professor Thornton, he had lots of education. But you know the county wouldn't pay him like they paid them white teachers. No, he was as poor as we were. But you know, Professor Thornton loved us, and he taught us. And that's why I always tried real hard. That way, you could see that smile come on his face.
now, by working cooperatively and sharing, Fannie Lou was able to get some schooling. In fact, the family was able to work themselves out of debt. They were able to rent some land and get 3 mules and a cow. They were working for themselves.
But their white neighbors didn't like that. One day while the family was away from their house, a white man stirred Paris green. That's a powder containing arsenic into the animal feed trough. That poison killed all of the animals. Family didn't have no other choice. They had to go back to plantation sharecropping. Fannie Lou had to quit school and work from January through December. And during the winter month, when the harvest was already completed, they would go to plantation to plantation, asking to pick over the fields to see if there was any cotton that was left. That was called scrapping cotton.
And when that landowner would tell my mama we could have that cotton, we would walk miles and miles in the run of a week. And the ground was froze hard. And we didn't have any shoes. We had to wrap our feet up in rags. Yes, we had to wrap them up in rags. And you know, we would go from field to field to field until we had scrapped a bale of cotton.
Takes 1,600 pounds of cotton to make bales.
And my mama would take that cotton and she would sell it. And it would get us some of the food that we needed.
The family was often hungry. Hard life for them. Hard life for all African Americans in the sharecropping system. Many young people felt trapped. Early in life, Fannie Lou felt trapped.
Well, I wanted to be white.
What?
Well, I know, but the reason being was that we worked hard all the time. And we never had enough food. We never had clothes, we never had shoes, we never had nothing. And the folks that didn't work, the white folks, they had everything. They had shoes, they had clothes, they had everything. So I wanted to be white.
One time when she was 10 years old,
I asked my mom why I wasn't white, so we could have some food to eat. And she said, Fannie Lou, she said, you mustn't feel that way. You must respect yourself as a black child. I tell you, my mama used to tell me that often. And she also told me, she said, Fannie Lou, she said, even if I'm dead and gone, you must respect yourself as a black woman. She said, and others will respect you too. I tell you, my mama telling me that and teaching me that is one of the things that kept me going. Yes, it did.
Walk with me, now Lord, walk with me. While I'm on this Jesus journey, I want Jesus to walk with me, be my friend, now Lord, be my friend, be my friend, now Lord, be my friend, while on this Jesus journey, I want Jesus to walk with me.
Fannie Lou grew into womanhood. She and a hard-working young man named Perry Hamer fell in love. In 1945, they were married. She and her husband, Pat, as she called him, worked as sharecroppers like their parents had before them.
I was able to get a job as the plantation timekeeper. I held that job for 18 years.
Now, Pat and Fannie Lou were strong black people and very much in love. But they were still sharecroppers, getting the dirty end of the stick.
Now that timekeeper job did help. It really did. It did help. But I tell you, there were many, many a day that my family was hungry.
Yeah.
And you know, in my lifetime,
Yeah.
we picked tons of cotton. But I still never was able to buy myself a new cotton dress.
Fannie Lou took on another job, cleaning the home of W.D. Marlowe, plantation owner. one day she was cleaning a bathroom in Marlowe's house. Marlowe's daughter walked up to Fannie Lou and said, Fannie Lou, you don't have to clean this one too good, it's just old honey's bathroom.
Old honey was a Marlowe's dog. Ain't that something? My husband and my children and me, we had to use an outhouse. But that dog had his own private family.
By 1962, Fannie Lou had spent the best part of her years working cotton, keeping time, cleaning a white man's house, and tending to her own family.
I was 44 years old then, and a nobody. And Ruleville, Mississippi was a nowhere place. But I tell you, I never gave up hope.
The 1954-55 Montgomery bus boycott offered hope, along with the leadership of Dr. Martin Luther King. But it was SNCC, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, and the Southern Christian Leadership Conference organizers' efforts to get black people in Mississippi to vote that made the difference. And you see, the organizers said no change would come until African Americans could register and vote. But up until that moment, Fannie Lou had not known
that a Negro could register and vote. So, when they asked for somebody who would go down to the courthouse to register, wanted us to raise our hand. Well, I raised mine.
Yeah.
Well, I guess if I'd had any sense, I would have been scared. But what was the point? What was the point of being scared? What could they do to me? Kill me? Felt like they had been trying to do that ever since I could remember.
At the courthouse, Ms. Hamer and the others were asked to write the answers to 22 questions. Now, 21 of those questions had to do with things like where a person lived, where they worked, and so on. The registrars might even help them with that. That way they could pass on the information to the White Citizens Council. A council of organization of lawyers, bankers, politicians, businessmen, and even registrars. That way the White Citizens Council would know what black person needed to be put back in place. Now the last question asked the applicant to explain one of the 286 sections of the Mississippi State Constitution.
And not one of us from Ruleville could answer that question. So naturally, they did not register. Now, we were feeling pretty disgusted when we left that courthouse. And on top of that, the police hassled us while we were trying to go home. And then by the time I got back to the plantation, the landowner already knew I had tried to register. Now you figure that out. Now I worked for Marlowe for 18 years. I cleaned his house, even the dog's bathroom. I nursed his kids and took care of some of his family. But because I wanted to register to become a first-class citizen, you know what Marlowe did? He fired me and put me off the plantation. Wouldn't even let me stay on the plantation with my husband and my children.
Just about a year later, Fannie Lou attended a voter registration workshop in Charleston, South Carolina. On the way back, the bus stopped in Winona, Mississippi. One of the African-American passengers, Miss Annelle Ponder, she was arrested because she went inside the bus terminal. When Mrs. Hamer went to see about her, she too was arrested. And then one of the highway patrolmen discovered that she was from Ruleville and had been actively organizing her people to register while he went off on her.
Scandalize my name. Scandalize my name.
First,
Scandalize my name.
they beat on little 15-year-old June Johnson. Then they beat on Miss Potter. Now she was beaten twice. The second time because she would not answer yes sir to one of the policemen who kept calling her a black African
Scandalize my name.
And when they came for Fannie Lou Hamer, one of the lawmen said,
Get up from their fatso. And they took me out of the cell. And they made me lay down on this bunk bed with my face down. And there was these two black prisoners there. Now, I know some of you would say that you never would have done. You never would have done that. But you know, nobody knows what those black prisoners had to go through before they was ordered to beat me. And then I heard that white policeman tell that black man,
Make them
Scandalize my
wish you were
name.
dead.
Scandalize
If you don't be heard, you know what you're going to do.
and he didn't have no other choice. And he beat me. He beat me until he got tired. He beat me with a blackjack. And then the other one took over. And at first, I was trying to kick my legs and, jerk my body to get away from the legs. And then my dress commenced to working up over my thighs. And I tried to pull it down. And that's when that white policeman, he took my dress and he snatched it up over my head. And then they sat on my legs and my feet. And I couldn't move. I couldn't do nothing. I couldn't do nothing but scream.
Fannie Lou Hamer, a Christian woman, lay bleeding in a Winona, Mississippi jail when Medgar Evers was shot. 1 month later, 4 little girls were killed in the bombing of their Birmingham, Alabama church. In 1964, Cheney, Goodman, and Schwerner were killed in Philadelphia, Mississippi. Many more African Americans were terrorized and brutalized, all for trying to get African Americans to register and vote. But Fannie Lou Hamer was even more determined to continue the struggle.
There was nothing else they could take from me. They couldn't put me out of my house because I didn't have one. They couldn't fire me because I didn't have a job. There was nothing else that they could take from me any longer.
Fannie Lou and the other women who were brutalized in the Winona jail were lucky to get out alive. Eventually, they filed a criminal lawsuit against the police officers who had wrongfully detained them. But the officers lied, and they claimed that Fannie Lou and the others had resisted arrest, and even after booking, had refused to obey lawful orders and had to be dragged across the floor. Evidence and testimony contradicted their claims.
Now, these women had a legal right to be in the terminal facilities that the policemen ran them out of. The evidence was overwhelming that Fannie Lou, June, and Yvester had been brutalized, insulted, denied human and civil rights. The jury of white Mississippi men was out for only slightly an hour. The judge called for the verdict and the clerk read it.
United States against Earl Wayne Partridge, Thomas J. Herod Jr., William Sorrell, John Bassinger, and Charles Thomas Perkins. We, the jury, find the defendants not guilty.
Now that trial took place December 2nd to the 6th, 1963. And although Fannie Lou still trying to put her body back together after that beating, she increased the pace of her effort to convince African Americans of the need to register and vote. Fannie Lou believed that every Mississippian deserved better, a better place than where the racists was trying to hold them down in.
Now my family and I, we've suffered greatly since I started working with the movement. And although we've suffered, I do not feel that we have suffered in vain. Now some folks would say that we're satisfied with the way we've been living. But I am not. I have never been satisfied. So if registering to vote means becoming a first-class citizen and changing the structure of this state's government, I am determined to get every Negro in the state of Mississippi registered. By doing this, we can finally get the things that we have been denied the rights to. Now I can say this, there needs to be a change in Mississippi. A change. I am tired. I'm tired of being hungry and naked and looking at my children and so many other children begging for bread. I am sick and tired of being sick and tired.
The work of persuading African Americans to register was almost as difficult as trying to get the white officials to do the registering. See, African American had been terrorized, intimidated for so long. Most didn't even believe they had any rights. But Fannie Lou Hamer was dedicated to the SNCC campaign to get African American registered. She worked with ministers and the unchurched. And although she had but little school, she worked with college students and college graduates.
Fannie Lou was loved as a great orator. Except for Dr. King, Miss Hamer had no equal. Congresswoman Eleanor Holmes Norton once said that Fannie Lou could give you catchy phrases all right. But what got Eleanor's respect was Miss Hamer's ability to put together a mosaic of coherent thought about freedom and justice that held together with wonderful cohesion. Her speeches set the room on fire. As she broke out in song at the end. Her speeches had themes. They had lessons. They had principles. And in the end, everyone knew that she had put her finger on what everyone present felt. Bernice Johnson Reagan met Fannie Lou Hamer when she was a teenager.
There was something about the culture because
if you come at it from a Western perspective, you'll be trying to sort out whether I'm a singer, or handle him as a singer, or a speaker, or an organizer who can sing and speak. But if you just look at her, she's just a fierce warrior. That's Fannie Lou Hamer. So she's a warrior who could sing and could speak and could organize and could, just a multi-talented, fierce fighter.
The Freedom Democratic Party is not seated now. I question America. Is this America, the land of the free and the home of the brave, where we have to speak with our telephones off the hook because our lives be threatened daily, because we want to live as decent human beings in America? Thank you.
She looked like all the black women I knew. She was hefty, she was short, she had a singing voice, very much like the women who came out of our church. She didn't look like my teacher, she looked like the usher on the usher board. So she looked like a person that was very much like, she looked real regular. And what I saw was the clarity. She was so clear. And there was such a breath of fresh air. And she was so powerful. She was describing, people shooting at her and beating her, and she was fine. I really liked the feeling that in the midst of the most intense danger, there could be a sense of peace and safety, that you really could speak with immense anger about a situation, and what people listening to you felt was how much love you had in you. Those are not lessons you get off. She was always so clear and so strong and insistent. And she was so mad and she was so loving. It was just, I really needed to meet a black woman like that.
After her testimony at the convention, Fannie Lou Hamer returned to Mississippi, where her singing and speeches were in great demand. She continued to work tirelessly even after the Voter Rights Act was passed in 1965. Back home, she ran for Congress and participated in civil rights legislation. She never gave up, and she worked tirelessly, and she continued to give until her health gave out in 1977. She is memorialized in her hometown of Louisville, Mississippi, where her burial ground is sacred space.
This little light of mine,
I'm gonna let it shine.
this little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Now, if you think you know a little something or everything about this woman, Fannie Lou Hamer, well, you need to take a look around at the nearest woman to you. You might be in the presence of a real, regular warrior woman.
Fannie Lou Hamer.
Fannie Lou Hamer.
Fannie Lou Hamer.
Fannie Lou Hamer.
freedom land. Ain't gonna let no jailhouse turn me around, turn me around, turn me around. Ain't gonna let no jailhouse turn me around. I'm gonna keep on walking, I keep on talking, marching up to freedom land. Ain't gonna let segregation turn me around, turn me around, turn me around. Ain't gonna let segregation turn me around. I'm gonna keep on walking, keep on talking, marching up to freedom land. And our members today, Robin Knoll,